Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Dan Cardalicchio coming to you again with another segment of Destination Health Podcast, Finding Function in a Dysfunctional World. I'm very excited about the podcast today because we just had a podcast before the podcast. I am here with a friend of mine, Renee Jayne. Renee, how are you doing today? What's going on?
I am excellent. Good to be here.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And you're outside of the Detroit, right? And it's hot where it's hot where you are, just like it is here in New
So hot
Jersey.
here right now.
I'm looking at my computer. It's 90 degrees at 9:30 in the morning here.
Yeah.
So it's a little hot. So Renee has recovered from her own autoimmune issues. She had a nodule on her thyroid and other healing crises. She gave birth drug-free for over 48 hours to a child that's 13 in 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Doctors told her she would never had. She started her first business at the age of 19, and 23 years later, Renee, you're not supposed to give those numbers because now everybody's gonna.
Renee works for me.
Yeah, you know what? I get it. I love that. Is a presence in many people's lives. She's appeared on many podcasts, television. She's a respected expert. Reputation allows her to speak to many well-known corporations, traveled to over 40 countries. Her community knows her as a powerful manifestor, medical and emotional intuitive, holistic and spiritual practitioner and teacher. 40 countries. Renee, where'd you go? Come on, just give us a little bit before we dig.
Oh man, Spain, Italy. You'll appreciate that one.
Why? Because I'm Italian American.
Yes. Ireland, Czech Republic.
You just like to travel. You just like travel.
Yeah, a bunch of the warm places,
Yeah, that's why you got to move out of Detroit.
Yeah.
Your son's playing baseball, so Florida is in your future. I see that as an intuitive. I see Florida in the next 2 years. All right, let's get into this. Autoimmune conditions. Tell me, what did you have? What was going on in your life?
Yeah, well, for me, we kind of chatted about this briefly before the podcast started in our first podcast, but it was me getting on the pill behind my parents' back because I went to the health department and I knew I needed to get on the pill. And that was really when it started. I didn't associate it with the pill, but I went to my father eventually. I told him what I had done, and his response, good dad, was, I want you to see an actual doctor. Let's get a real prescription. Let's do. So when I went to see that doctor, they did the whole blood work and everything, and they told me I was 16, you have high cholesterol, you have high blood pressure, and blah blah blah, all this other stuff.
All the side effects of hormones.
Yeah.
Oh, in your body.
Here's your pill. And so, and by the time I was about to turn 18, I was diagnosed with shingles. Just pretty bad scenario because I was flunking out of my first semester of college classes. I couldn't get up off the couch. And shortly after that, I went in, wanted to be tested, and they said, we think you have leukemia, which they quickly realized I didn't. And they just said to me, basically, you don't have any white blood cells. It seems to us that you're constantly allergic to something in your environment or that you're eating. And back then I had, the old computers, those big, huge, I remember sitting there, I'm researching, I'm trying to figure it out. People are telling me I'm a hypochondriac, I had headaches all the time. I was always sick. Gut health issues.
What type of computer did you have? What was it?
IBM, I think.
Oh, okay. All right.
I don't know. My dad was really he was ahead of his time. So I don't.
Yeah.
I don't know what we had, but I was still living at home. So, but ultimately, I went back to this doctor and I said, I did some research and I read that maybe it's dairy. Maybe I'm eating some foods. And he said, oh, food's just a placebo effect and has nothing to do with that. And so ultimately they sent me on, they told me my immune system was shot. but they didn't have any reason. They had no answers. And
here you are, you're in college, teenager, your immune system shot. You have no white blood cells.
Yeah.
Don't eat. Don't even have to worry about eating right. Yeah. Just, it's a placebo, but I don't have a pill. So I went from the birth control pill. Let's take that off and let's go to another pill that will take care of this pill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I will say too that I was eating horribly. Back then I loved Coca-Cola. I was smoking Marlboro Lights. I loved sugar. Right. My first job was Dairy Queen, so it was.
How could you not eat the profits on that one?
Yeah,
right?
I mean, you would purposely mess up so you could take those home at the end of the night. And
right.
But the perfect storm in my body ultimately led me to a point where I was being hospitalized on the regular for my headaches. I was vomiting from the pain, and I had my stomach bloated out like I was looking 4 months pregnant when I wasn't. And then ultimately I lost my menstrual cycle. It just went away. And some women do lose their cycle when they're working out excessively and for other reasons. And that was not me. I was afraid to do anything because I thought I might trigger another headache.
Something. Or it could be something. Yeah.
Berkshire response to some, I didn't know what that was, but I hit my tipping point at that point. Yeah.
So that was a pretty low point then in your life, and you weren't happy. You're hospitalized, nausea, vomiting, headaches, no menstrual cycle. You're taking meds to help try to correct and so forth and so on. Yeah. And, I'm 60 years old. Back then, fast foods during the 70s became really predominant. And, you had breakfast, lunch, and dinner. High school, we used to sneak out of high school because we couldn't go off rounds. Yeah. Sorry, Sister Mary. So if you're listening to this, so we used to go to McDonald's, right down, Broad Street, and we used to, for me it was Big Mac, and it was, large Coke and some large fries, man. It was living back then, but we didn't understand the ramifications of all of this stuff, right?
No,
not at all. So you hit this low point. What did you do next to start getting yourself back on track? Because you took care of this on your own. It was like, you know what, if I don't take care of this, nobody's going to, because I'm getting answers, but maybe not the best answers for me at this point in time, right?
Yeah. So at the time, I have to add this little piece because it was a big part of it was
absolutely.
I was in college, and I was running a business actually while in college. So overloaded stress wise, working a lot of hours. And I was traveling also. So there was just all these things going on. And this is important because the big reason that motivated me to do something about my health is that it was cramping my lifestyle.
Yeah.
That time it was ego. Like I wanted to look good in my bathing suit, and I wanted to be able to show up and make the money and do the thing.
You're looking good. You're feeling good. You ought to be in Hollywood. I want to pull up in my Ferrari. I want to have my bikini. I'm in, Miami Beach. I'm having a good time. I got margaritas all over the place.
And I hate to say that, but I think that that's kind of the nature of humanity in a sense, that it's not like we will put off our health and we will put off stuff, but it's like the pain that we need to get into is when it starts to cramp our lifestyle. And that's what happened to me. And I was actually on a beach in Jamaica, and I was recovering from a really bad migraine, and everyone around me was partying and having a good time. And I was like covered up in all the towels and like hiding myself while beautiful people were playing volleyball and all that.
Yeah.
And one of my friends, she was looking good in her bikini. And I said to her, "What are you doing? You look amazing." And she's like, "Oh, I did this cleanse thing." She tells me all about it.
And you're like, what is a cleanse, right?
Yeah, that's the first time I ever heard of anything like that. I had never even stepped in like Whole Foods at that time. I was, not aware of health, or I didn't even like to cook at that moment in my life. And so I took this information in, and it sat with me the whole trip. And when I got home, I'd made the decision. And
You
I
made
did.
that decision. You needed to change your life at that point.
Yeah.
Because you never know where it's going to go, but you need to make sure that you figure out what you need to do. You know what? I think that for all of us that are in the biz, we've all had these types of situations. Renee, 37 years old, heart attack, offices, 3 different offices, entrepreneurial, just like you are, right? Where you're, having businesses. As a matter of fact, I said something on one of the social media platforms about, paying for my own schooling, and then two other docs came after me and said it was impossible. And now there was this back and forth and so forth and so on. It seems like you went through the same thing. When you're entrepreneurial, you just go when it comes to that. Because stress play, and the reason why I'm bringing this up is because stress plays an important aspect of it, because you must have been not know.
I mean, my nervous system, I didn't know it until later, but I always felt like I had one foot on the gas pedal and one foot on the brake.
Yeah.
My cortisol was off the charts.
All over the place.
I was basically operating in like a high adrenaline, I'll call it addicted way,
right,
without even knowing it. And so the food was the first step for me, but ultimately later on, and I still work through this every day, is like regulating my nervous system so I could hold the health in my body, because that was a disaster back then. Yeah.
Right. And we didn't know how to deal with stress back then. Stress wasn't something that you had to be stoic, in other words, right? You were just stressed. And if you're in that 18 to 30 range, you can handle stress for long periods of time, right?
Yeah.
You're in school, you're going to get up, maybe you got some sales to make, and maybe you're going to drop off some product to somebody or multiple people. You're going to class, and then, you have some sales calls afterward. Yeah, Renee's like, yeah, I get it. And then in the evening, you're doing a little studying and stuff like that. And, we didn't know how to deal with stress. I mean, it felt good actually back in those days until it didn't feel good anymore, right?
Yeah, till your body basically shuts down and says, we're not having this anymore.
No, you're not having this anymore at all. So what did you do? So did you go on a cleanse? Did you look at it?
Yeah, I did this. It was an eating plan / cleanse, but it cut out the things: sugar, gluten, dairy, like processed packaged foods. And I will be honest, I wasn't even perfect at it, but I gave it my best shot. And at the end of it, I remember feeling proud of myself that I was so committed. And it was more for me too. Like, I remember having to get artichokes, and I didn't even know what that looked like. And so there was a stress even about, I got to change my behavior here and change my life. And the big thing that I remember noticing was the taste of an orange, because my taste buds had shifted so much from being taken off the sugar.
Right.
And food tasted delicious again. And
it exploded. It exploded in your mouth. It was like, wow, I never knew this. What I find is interesting is this. And I was on a podcast a couple of years ago, and they were kind of saying that drinking a sugary, diety type of a soda, it's not a big deal, So I look at my patients today, and I don't know about you, but back then I lived on caffeinated beverages, right? I didn't have, like they were saying, oh, you can have one every. You can have one every once in a while. And I'm like, I think I was having 8 sugary colas a day, right? It wasn't like you got the big 64-ounce, whatever that, right? Remember that?
I remember my grandmother taking me to the side and saying, you have a problem with this Coca-Cola. And she told me about it, how it took the rust off the car. And I just like, whatever.
I loved it.
Yeah.
I loved it. I loved it. I mean, so when I have people coming in, they tell me that they're on, they drink iced tea because it's made from the best stuff on earth, right? And I look at them, and how many you have a day? Well, I have a dozen a day. I have the first one at 7 o'clock in the morning when I get up. And I'm like, wow, your insulin is all over the place.
And super dehydrated on top.
That's right. So I look at this and I say, I don't have any of those beverages anymore, even if it's every once in a while, because the pounding headache and I don't feel well afterwards, Renee, right? I'm sure you have the same experience.
I just can't. I mean, I will allow myself sugar from time to time and situations where there's a gathering and I feel like it, but mostly I literally feel hungover.
Yeah, sure, 100%.
Yeah.
So now what else did you do? What did you do after the cleanse? What was that moment in time that got you going again?
Yeah, so it was for me in my life experience, it feels like I go through these situations and then I end up realizing I need to share it, or so of course people started coming to me in flocks, and not even as a business, just what are you doing? You look different, that that kind of stuff. And then I got really passionate. I decided I was going to start the organic garden in my backyard, and I got into food. I started reading. I read this book called Omnivore's Dilemma, Michael Pollan, and that was like a pretty pivotal moment for me, just to see, because he talked about where the fast food came from. And I saw like the industry of fast food and the money making part of it, and how it was in the high fructose corn syrup specifically was affecting us. And I kind of got pissed. I got angry, and I'm like, this isn't okay. So I wanted to not only eat well, but I wanted to, in a sense, like personally boycott any of the companies and organizations that were contributing. And it led me, I was on an airplane, I was traveling on a vacation, and I'm sitting next to this man, and he notices a book I'm reading, which I can't recall that book right now. And so he strikes up a conversation with me, and it turns out that he is a third generation farmer from the Midwest, and his previous two generations before him, they didn't do things organically. And so when he took over the farm, he said he started doing everything he learned from his grandfather and his father, and he got all these boils all over his body that were so bad no one could. So he decided to do a detox, and the detox made him smell so horrid that he was like, I didn't shop in my town because I didn't want to offend people.
You didn't want to offend anybody.
Yep. And so he decided that he was going to change the farm to completely organic, which was a huge process at that time to do something like that. And he told me his life story. He told me about everything he went through and how those pesticides and him breathing them in were so drastically impacted him. And yes, he was spraying it, but more so what happens when we eat it. And yeah, so I feel like that man combined with my own experience was really the kicker. And then I had a child, and I knew I didn't want to go back to the travel all the time and the lifestyle I was living there. And I had to work for myself. I had worked for myself already. And so I decided.
Children have a tendency to do that. They have a tendency to, get you more grounded and stuff like that, right? No doubt.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, I'm not meant to work for other people in that regard.
You want me to do what?
Yeah.
Who? When? You sure you want me to do this?
Yeah.
Because I would do this if I were you, because doing this is not going to work out so well. But I'm the boss. You have to do that. All right. I just wanted to be on the record if it didn't work out. Oh, it didn't work out now, did it? I told you. Sorry, Charlie, for the imposition, but I'm out of here. Goodbye. I'm going to open up a business right next to yours the same, and I'm going to knock you out of business because you don't know what you're. Anyway, when did you find that you had, nodules on your thyroid, and what was that like?
So that was, let's see, maybe about 10 years later. I mean, I'd been through a divorce, and there was, and I say that because there was a lot more stress involved.
That's a stressful situation to go through, no doubt.
Yep. And lo and behold, I will say this, I did kind of get caught up into the part of when you go into school to be a nutrition person or functional medicine, any of the things that I wanted to try all of it because I was my own experiment. And so I was in the stage of, I'm going to be vegan. And, that can work for some people, but and I will say I was close to as perfect as a vegan as you could get. I didn't eat soy because I knew that would affect my hormones. I was on all the good supplements. I mean, this is my game, so I was on it. And I gained probably 15 pounds. And most of the problem with that weight gain, though, was when I was even out walking, I could feel like on the sides of my legs and my body, it was painful. I would just have like pain. And my period was a disaster. I was hormonal. I was emotional. Like everything was wrong that could be wrong.
Yeah, sure.
And so I go to my doctor, who's my friend. He's a holistic medical doctor, and he's feeling around. He's like, yo, you have nodules. Whole bunch. Counted at least 4. He wanted me to go get them checked out, but he's like, I have a feeling you probably won't. You're going to want to do this on your own, but you need to come back and see me in 6 months.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. That's fair.
And then the last thing he said was, Renee, some people don't absorb protein from plant sources as well if they have methylation issues. So you're going to need to
Smart man. Very smart.
This changed everything for me. And then he said, you're going to have to choose you or the cow because you need to eat red meat. Right. And so, for me, the vegan thing was so much like, I'll try this. But I, and I do, of course, care about our earth and our loving animals, but I wasn't like, it wasn't that hard for me. I was missing red meat. That was probably, I was ignoring that instinct for probably a long time. So,
and let me just interject here for a second. Because I think this is important, because if you're really into a diet for any of the listeners, it's fine. And Renee will agree, right? You could be vegan, you could be a carnivore, but what she just said, everybody is unique. Everybody has a different metabolism. Everybody has a different biochemistry. So you need to find out what that is that works for you. And that's where we come in to help you find that out. Because Renee, I've had vegans now eating different sources of protein, fish, and so forth. A very good friend of mine, excuse me, and she's been on my podcast. I've been on her podcast. I've been on her summits. She had a very tough time. She grew up as a vegan, but for her, it wasn't the best diet. I have patients coming in on the Mediterranean diet that may not be, there's components of that diet. And that's the important aspect for anybody, for all of us that are listening in today. You can be into a diet, that's fine, but there maybe is some aspects that may not be the best for you. And if you have methylation problems and you're not absorbing proteins, you're going to have to get a methylated B vitamin type of a thing. It goes into the pathway. It's a whole biochemical thing for everybody. I'm not going to bore everybody with that. I'll draw that later for my son, because he's going to have to know that, I think, next year, but not now. Anyway, but that was smart that he said that. Smart, come back. That's fair. There's nothing wrong with that. That's my job. I want to know what's going on, right?
Yeah.
Sure. What happened from there?
And so I did the iodine. I started adding the red meat back in. I started doing a lot of supportive herbs. Of course, the methylated B vitamins. I was doing B12. I was drinking a good green drink just to get more nutrients into my body. And then I noticed the lineage in my family. Hashimoto's, every woman had thyroid issues. And I was like, okay, this is what I do for a living. I gotta obviously figure this out, because I'm changing the lineage here. I am not gonna keep carrying this on. And I also saw that it was emotional mastery work that I had to look at, because a lot of the thyroid is about listening and self-talk and how we bully ourselves. And
how were you bullying yourself?
It was internalized bullying. It was around I was a workaholic. That's really where it came from. I wasn't doing enough, or I wasn't good enough. And it wasn't even like so conscious to me at that time. I had to pay attention to where my thoughts were, but I was very hard on myself internally.
Right.
And so combined with nutrition and that, and moving and adding in more sources of protein that I was needing, my body started to like it. I don't even know how long it took. I want to say 6 to 8 months, but ultimately there was an adrenal gland healing section of that though that still goes on today, where I wasn't supporting my adrenal glands. I was an adrenaline junkie and had no idea. And so when I went back, ultimately the nodules were gone. And I felt confidence that I had some kind of tool, like a toolkit for me to take care of how my body worked, because I have that, well, the MTHFR we talked about, there's the mother effer gene. This is what it looks like.
That's right.
Yep. But ultimately it was a good thing, because it really taught me more about how to take care of my body as its unique structure. Yeah.
So from here now, you're figuring out your body, you're figuring out your metabolism and your biochemistry. Ultimately, you're like, all right, I'm going to change careers here, right? I'm going to sit there and I'm going to do this for a living. So what was that like?
Well, I was already a coach. So I had been a coach, a nutritional coach and a life coach for, let's see, by the time that thyroid thing happened, maybe about 4 years already. So I was supporting myself and my son in this business world that way. But it really did change for me, because I went back and studied more on I got some deep training on how to read blood work. I learned how to do genetic testing and understand that in a way where I was qualified to help people with those specific things. And then on my personal side, I went and did one of those Vipassana meditation retreats, which is like a 10-day, it's silent. You don't speak for 10 days and you meditate for 10 hours a day. And that really shifted.
My son could never do that, just to let you know, Renee.
He's a talker. I didn't know that I could either, but I felt like I needed to look at, I mean, trauma is kind of like a big word these days, but at the time I could tell that there was a part of me that was just constantly running and running and running. And even though people perceived me as very present and calm, internally I felt like I was always going. And so I'll tell you a quick story of what happened at that Vipassana. So when I was 5 years old, my parents opted for me to have plastic surgery on my ears. I was born and my ears stuck out a little bit, and I'm sure they were worried that it would look funny, and they did this plastic surgery thing. Well, I don't know if they goofed it up, but I had no feeling or sensation on both of my ears, but particularly the right one. 3/4 of the ear was numb my entire life. So you could put like a pin in there and I wouldn't really feel it. So during this 4th day of sitting in meditation, my ears got so hot, like I felt like someone was holding fire to them. And I concerned myself. I didn't know if I needed to get up and ask for help. Like, am I having a stroke or a heart attack here? Like, what's going on? I decided, because that's what they instruct you to do, is just to be present with your experience, whatever it is, and to notice it. And so that's what I did. Ultimately, it passed after a period of time, and a rush went up the sides of my head. And to this day, I have full feeling in my ears. And so I wasn't planning. I didn't go to Vipassana and meditate, have any idea about my ears. I mean, think about it. But the idea behind that for me, I still don't know exactly, is that by me being present with the sensations in my body, because that's what Vipassana is. It's the sensations through your whole body, and just being present with it, it helped things kind of find their way back to themselves, right? self-healing ultimately. And that was a big wake-up call for me, that my body had this capacity to source its own safety and healing, and I didn't need to do it externally as much as I had once thought.
Right.
So,
sure.
Yeah.
Awesome. So you're going through all of these transformations at this point in your life, right? You're going through so many different types of things, right? All for the positive. And then you decided, okay, I'm a coach. Now I want to take this now to the people, and I want to be able to help the people. Tell us about your average client that comes into your office.
Yeah. So usually it's a person who is a entrepreneurial type individual, shocker, runs like CEOs, run some kind of leadership position in their life. And I'd say for the most part, people who come to see me now already know about health. They've been doing this for a while. They understand pretty much half the conversation that we're talking about, but they're stuck and they haven't been able to figure it out. I feel like they need more sources on it's the autoimmune stuff happening in their body combined with the nervous system support. So they're in adrenaline response often, so their hormones are off, and their relationships are starting, this is the thing that I love saying to people after, is like, they come to me for their health, but ultimately it was because their relationships were struggling and they didn't know how to fix that. And so it's like this combination of intimacy with your own body, and when you get more in touch with your own self, it impacts your relationships around you. And it changes everything, even in the relationship you have to your work.
Yep.
So I don't like to say I'm a intimacy coach, because that implies sex all the time, and it really, it's not necessarily that. Intimacy, like sexual intimacy, is like the easiest kind. I'm talking about the other 6 levels of
within yourself.
Emotional, body connection.
Right. Sure. And that's important, because it's from the 70s, getting in tune with yourself. It was all foo-foo back then.
Yeah, the woo-woo stuff.
Yeah, it was all foo-foo back then. And relationship, because I mean, you had said something earlier today, and I love asking this question. Your comment was you wanted to look good in a bikini. So your relationship with your physical being at that point in time, that's the way it was. I mean, during the 80s, when the supermodels hit, I mean, there were so many magazines, and you would buy the magazines just to stare. And I'm not talking Playboy, because you got physiques,
Sports Illustrated,
the physiques and stuff like that. That was it was vanity back then. Although I'm training to go on stage, but I guess that's a little vain too, right? Do I have to see you for a relationship thing with that within my,
I don't know. Well, that's to be determined.
Oh, geez, looks like we're gonna have another podcast, and you'll be coaching me that way. Like, why do you want to do this? I don't know. My friend called me up and he said, send me a picture. He goes, all right, you're old, but we can work with this. We're gonna go, you're going on stage anyway. What was your relationship with food when you were a vegan or beyond? Because I find in my practice a relationship, and this is outside. I mean, I'm learning about this every day. I refer out to somebody who's a specialist in this. People have an odd relationship with food. I know this is bad for me, but I'm going to eat it anyway. I have this addiction, this affliction towards something. I have this horrible See, I get excited with this. I have this horrible relationship with food. Talk about that.
Yeah. Well, I think a benefit that I didn't realize at the time for me was when I was exiting my marriage at that time, I had recognition. There's this one moment where there's a party going on at my house, and everyone was drunk. Wasted.
It was a party for your divorce. That's it. You were getting divorced.
I guess so.
Let's go. Everybody at my house.
Yep. And I at that
beer,
time,
let's go.
and I don't get me wrong, back then I liked to party too, but at that time I had a new baby, and so I wasn't partaking. And I remember feeling like almost like a moment, I felt like I was on a movie set, and everyone around me I could see was an addict. And so I went to one of those like Al-Anon meetings because I thought maybe I can help some people. And I quickly realized that I was the center of the universe of the addiction.
Isn't
and that I had to help myself.
interesting?
Yeah.
Thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that.
Yeah.
But isn't that interesting? Because
It
you don't
was.
have to be, I mean, when you hear the word addict, you think of drugs.
Exactly. And
It
I
could
think it's a
be,
scary word for a lot of people. But at that time, when I got honest, which is like what I was told to do, and I could see I was I was a sugar addict. I'm a recovering sugar addict is how I see it. I also used food addictively. It was a behavior for me to cope when I was stressed out. I would just like kind of mindlessly eat.
you were emotionally eating.
Yep. And then I also was even addicted to the drama with people, and like so there was this theme of kind of addiction within me that I started, that became a personal focus for me. So I worked with therapists and I did 12 steps. I sponsor people, like I'm open about all that. I don't think it's the only way. But I created this program called Sugar Recovery that isn't 12-step related. I'm just saying the recovery piece. And I gave this talk at a health food store, and I told them I wanted to call it like something sugar addiction. And they said, we can't use the word addiction. And I said, no, we really have to, because this is what people write to me about all the time. I feel addicted to sugar. I feel addicted to food. They use this word. I think it's, and at that health food store, normally when I spoke there was like 30 or 40 people who would come. And that day, over 200 people showed up to that sugar addiction talk. And I knew I had something to help them with because I'd been through it, but I also felt so not alone. It's like, okay, this is definitely a thing that we're all dealing with. And so that kind of, just answer your question, that summarizes how I had lived almost my entire life. My relationship with food was highly dysfunctional.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I understand, and I look at it, and I'm going to ask you, what do you think the root cause is? I'll share my story so that you feel comfortable telling me where yours came.
All right.
So I think that I know that I had this terrible relationship with food growing up in this Italian family. Food is a central part of your existence. It's true. I mean, you walk in, my mother, every Friday night, by the way, my mother passed away in June, and she yelled at she was yelling at everybody when she was passing. I don't want you to cry. I want you to think of the Friday nights for decades where we all went over for pizza or something like that. She made 50 pizzas out of this little, that's a story for another time. But, at some point in time, the food changed in the 70s. It was all processed, right? And, growing up in an immigrant family, there wasn't a lot of money back then, or as we used to say, green shkadol money. And so we didn't have any money. So when there was food, we ate, because, the next meal may be a little bit, it wasn't like a traditional breakfast, lunch, and dinner type of a situation. You know what I'm saying? So I think that when there was food, I just ate the food, and I just was doing it subconsciously, because I didn't know, it's not that we didn't eat, you may not have a meal, if you have breakfast, you may not have anything till 8 o'clock at night, not because people were busy and working, because we needed to make some cash to go buy the food, so we were doing that. So I think that I ate, and I think I ate more than what I should have. And I had this terrible relationship, and I realized that with food. And sometimes I do that today. Last night I was at a barbecue-y type of a thing with my son, and there was a lot of good food. And boy, I could have gorged. Renee, I could have gone all night, and, I would have felt horrible this morning. And then I would have gorged some more to feel better, because that's the vicious cycle. So I showed you mine. All right. You're welcome. Where does yours come from? Where does this relationship with food, if you will?
Yeah, I look at it as like a three-pronged issue. So the first part of it is, not to be too technical, but it's ultimately the mitochondria in my body.
You got really technical just then, but that's okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the mitochondria is like our battery. It's our energy. It lives inside the lining of our organs and our gut. And so if that is not strong, just to put it simply, we're going to crave things externally that kind of match that. And so that was one thing. And I had many years of pharmaceuticals and stuff that kind of broke down that mitochondria, combined with a lot of stress, which we talked about. The other thing was I think part of the culture, we were advertised to. I like to say because like my 13-year-old, almost 13-year-old son, he and I have this joke because he says, well, the TV says, and just because he gets it that the TV is just kind of indoctrinating our beliefs about a lot of things. And so that's what I was raised to see, that like food solves the problems, and when you're stressed you eat. And my upbringing on my family, it's similar to you, as I kind of watched people emotionally eat. And then the big root cause, this is a big one for me that I help my clients with as well, is I believe it's a fear of intimacy. Like we all have this desire to be intimately connected and seen by other people. Like we want to have those deep conversations and for people to see us and to know us. And then yet we also simultaneously fear that at the same time. So when we're in environments that are poking at our intimacy, like a gathering of people, or if we are in a moment of like, oh, I need to step up and put myself out there and share something, and it's uncomfortable, whatever that intimacy issue might be, it can kind of reflect back to the food that we, and so it's like your intimacy with food is, to me, part of the root cause, because you're needing to, it's a growing pain.
I understand what you're saying.
That's my experience.
I think that in combination with external stuff like processed foods just kind of was a perfect storm at one point in time. Because I remember during the 60s, the homemade macaroni and the homemade foods, you can have maybe salami. It was different. It was just much different. And then all of a sudden, I mean, we had the Italian delis that used to import stuff every day, by the way, because we were just buying it. But it was different then than it, and then all of a sudden it changed. You didn't, it became, people were less interested in going to those stores. Maybe it was expensive, and it was easier to go to the supermarket, and you could purchase it there. And I just remember eating salami and provolone, and it was just addictive. It just tasted more addictive, more salt and stuff like that. So you drank more of the sugary sodas, and it was just this cause set in motion that happened. And you just didn't, it was like a cycle, and it was tough to get off of after a period of time. So for everybody listening today, we understand your pain.
We get it.
We've
and the food,
we've lived it.
I have a lot of clients who are expats that have come to me over the years, that particularly live where I live, but all over. And so it's so many people say, I don't understand. I was so healthy. I was taking good care of myself back in Europe. And now that I'm living here in the States for the last year, I'm bloated. I have all these symptoms. And the food here is just shifted and changed so much. We don't really know what's inside most of what we're eating when it's packaged, processed stuff, and so that doesn't help us. And I think it's important, because we can talk about our own willpower over food, and we can talk about intimacy stuff and all that, but the food in general, it's lacking.
I remember reading an article. This reminds me of an article that I read in Mayo Clinic Proceedings, I think 4 or 5 years ago, when they were talking about processed foods, when they were, the cakes, the candies, and stuff like that. And they said that it's readily available, it's highly palatable, and it's affordable. It's all of these ables, that you can have, and you can eat this particular way, and it just changes your stuff. I was on another podcast with this other 2 individuals, and one was making fun of me because I mentioned real food. So I said, I'm confused. And we had our podcast before the podcast, that I like to maneuver. So I was maneuvering and posturing. And I just basically said, listen, I don't understand. I said, perhaps you can educate me. But eating a cake, a Twinkie. Oh my God, how could you not love Twinkies back then, right? A Twinkie with a sugary cola. Renee, I was in heaven. I'm salivating.
I love sugar.
Right. So, so is that real? I said, is that something that's a real food? And you would recommend that? Because I had one sports nutritionist say to me, yeah, you can have, a fast food hamburger after working out. You're going to get gains because there's protein in there. I was like, what? I said, I think there's better sources of protein. I don't consider that real food. And if you're 18-year-old male who's a bodybuilder that's going to play at a D1 football school, you have so much testosterone running in your system naturally that you don't have, you could put anything in your body just about, and I'm going to make these gains. You got to meet people where they are. And I said, that's not real. But going back to what you were saying is that it was made to be real. Right? It was cool to smoke a particular cigarette, and you can sit there with a sugary soda, and you can have your cake with a little ice cream on it. You might as well put little nuts and some chocolate syrup on there. Boy, it's 3 o'clock in the morning and I can't fall asleep, and I get a pounding headache, and you wonder why.
Mm-hmm.
You have some.
And so many doctors, practitioners are more aware now in comparison to way back when we're referring to. But I still think we have a lot of ways to go, because a lot of individuals are not educated when they go to school about how our food system works, and like the money behind the system and that fuels the things that get stocked on our shelves, that get advertised to us and to our children. And so we have like a mentality of, oh, this is not a big deal, and it's advertised as natural and low fat or light or whatever they want to put on there, and so we think this must be a good option for me.
Right. And it sounds fair too, right? I mean, it does sound fair when you sit there and you say it and you put it like that. But I think that people need to become a little bit more savvy and realize that you need to look into stuff a little bit more and have a healthy dose of criticism, not cynicism, but criticism, or a healthy dose of, what's going on here, and make just better decisions for you and for your family, because I think that's extremely important. And that's what I try to do when I'm dealing with the patient. I'm making lifestyle changes. I'm making positive lifestyle changes. That's what I'm in the business of doing.
Yeah.
Wheelhouse is metabolic type diseases, cardiovascular, metabolic syndrome, type 2 diabetes. That's my wheelhouse. But I say to them, I'm making positive lifestyle changes so that you can not only, get better for yourself, but then you can start teaching, because your kids will learn, your children will learn. Your 13-year-old is going to learn how to eat and how to behave when it comes to this.
Yeah.
Right. So it becomes a situation. I love pizza. My mother made pizzas, but it was different pizza. It was more homemade ingredients. So I'll have a slice every now and again. And I was busy in the office, and I'll admit it to everybody listening today in front of Renee, I went to a pizzeria and I got a slice, got a Sicilian slice, because I'm Sicilian. So I got a Sicilian slice, I put a little Parmesan cheese on there. I put a little hot seeds on there. All right. I did get a water.
I will say
Renee,
it
2
sounds
hours.
good. It sounds really good. And
2 hours later, Renee, I
you
was
were
sitting in the office. Drool was coming down my chin. I was sleeping, probably snoring, but I really didn't feel very well.
Yeah.
But it tasted good going down, but then it just wasn't.
Yeah.
It wasn't. And I'm
that's
glad
kind
I
of a
didn't go
bummer
for that
nowadays,
second.
right?
Yeah.
We kind of have to do it sometimes. We have to let ourselves indulge, and then we got to see what happens, just to remember. It's a bummer, but
And listen, I'm going to say amen to that. You know why?
Yeah.
Because I'll say to my patients after we put them on the elimination diet, and if we do decide to add in another food source, what happens is that you eat a food source you're not supposed to eat. Then what happens is, tell me how it feels later on.
Yeah.
Because it starts working against you, and that's always an interesting concept. Renee, we're almost done. Boy, this went pretty quick.
It did.
I think
It's
that
fun.
was just, we're scratching the surface, so we're gonna have you back on again. All right, Renee.
Look forward to it.
Yeah, it'll be good.
Happy.
Renee, tell me, if you were to give 3 tips, 3 strategies for success. Oh boy. Making you
Okay.
think a little bit. Watch, I'm writing these down for the show notes.
Okay.
1, 2, 3. 3 strategies for success. What would they be?
Start your day away from your phone. Don't wake up and go
I love that.
right to that screen. Like, let yourself sit with what's going on inside and maybe write it down or pray, meditate, whatever works.
Do a little journaling, do a little meditating.
Not always easy, but that's what I recommend as number 1. Number 2, just like focus on water. I think that, and like even adding good minerals to your water, clean water. Just, I know that sounds so simple, but I think most of us are chronically dehydrated.
Listen, it's old school, but it's true school. You know, where you're drinking your water. You're drinking your water. I got my bottled water right here. I got lemon in there. I got lime in there. I'll put a cucumber in there. I'll make some cucumber water. I'll put mint in there just to break it up, because I get it. It's December and you don't want to drink, I don't know, 64 ounces, we'll say, break it up a little bit and put some of that stuff in there to give it a little pop. Don't put scotch in there.
No.
That goes against a little scotch water with a little. So I get it. Yeah.
No practitioner is going to be able to help you if you're dehydrated anyway. So that's the first thing that's got to happen. And then the third thing I would say is look at where your intimacy issues are with food. Like where do you use food to cope when you're not feeling good? Right. In essence, like let yourself be more clear on like what's going on for me, and even if you still eat the food, that's okay, but just recognize that you're eating it because you feel shitty emotionally and you don't know what to do about it.
I love that. I feel shitty emotionally.
Yeah. And I might eat to make it feel better, and that's okay, but just know that you're doing it if you're doing it.
I love it.
Thank
you. Renee, where can people find you?
They can go to Renee Jayne, which is ReneeJayne.com. My offerings on there. I got a bunch of free classes, all kinds of stuff.
It'll be in the show notes.
Okay.
All right. It'll be in the show notes so that people can click on. We recommend that you contact Renee. Let her help you. We recommend her 100%. Get into the website, see what she's all about. Give her a call and see what's going on. Renee, thank you very much for being on today.
Thank you.
It was a great conversation. It went very quick. We'll have to have you back on in September, early October, and we'll continue on with our conversation. I got to see where I am in the world.
Yeah.
We're going to Minnesota for hockey in September, and then I have a summit in the beginning of October. Then we're back in Minnesota again. I'm going to teach them how to play baseball a little bit better.
Yeah.
That's all I think, but that's okay. But thank you very much for being on today.
Thank you, Dan.
Want to thank everybody for listening in. Live your best life, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you, Renee.